The night unfolds with a stillness that feels ancient. The air is soft, cool against the skin, and somewhere beyond the reach of ordinary sight, the stars flicker in slow, deliberate rhythm. The world has gone quiet now, traffic long faded, the hum of daily noise dissolved into the vast breath of darkness. You lie back, listening to the low whisper of wind moving through open land, and the mind begins to drift. It is here, in these deep, unguarded hours, that the stories of the silent watchers begin to stir. There are places across this planet where silence carries weight. Not the kind born from peace, but something heavier, something charged. The locals say you can feel it the moment you step onto the soil, as if the earth itself remembers what the eyes of men could not comprehend. The deserts of New Mexico, where sand and metal once mingled beneath a sky split by light. The damp forests of Suffolk, England, where soldiers once walked between trees that pulsed with impossible color. The quiet hills of Pennsylvania, where a bronze object fell and the town below learned to keep its questions soft. These places do not shout their mysteries, they breathe them. They exist as open wounds in the landscape, where night air carries the echo of things unresolved. When the sun disappears and the horizon melts into indigo, you can almost sense it, the hum beneath the quiet. The feeling of being watched by something that neither threatens nor comforts, but merely observes. The watchers, they are called by some. Not necessarily beings of flesh or light, but presences that linger. Maybe they are the residue of something once seen, maybe they are the memory of human awe made manifest. Whatever they are, they seem to dwell in the margins of perception, content to remain unproven, yet never fully forgotten. For those who have stood alone beneath these skies, the sensation is unmistakable. The air grows denser. The ordinary sounds of night, the chirp of insects, the rustle of brush, fade as if the world itself holds its breath. And in that hush, the mind begins to question, what remains unseen above the dark line of trees? What intelligence, patient and eternal, waits beyond the horizon's edge? There are no answers here, only impressions, whispers, and the quiet companionship of mystery itself. As you listen, your breathing begins to slow. The story you are about to hear is not one of horror, but of wonder, the kind that has followed humankind since we first looked up into the night. These are the tales of places touched by the extraordinary, where the line between the earthly and the infinite thins to nothing. We will move through them gently, like walking through an abandoned field at twilight, careful not to disturb the silence that has settled over decades. In the days when radar was young and skies were new territory, reports of strange lights began to bloom like constellations on maps. Soldiers, farmers, pilots, and wanderers spoke of shapes that moved with purpose but without sound, lights that changed color as if breathing. Some were dismissed as illusions, others were studied, catalogued, and quietly filed away. But the ground remembered. The trees, the stones, the air, each seemed to hold a faint residue of those moments when the known world briefly bent and then returned to normal. And wherever this happened, a feeling remained, subtle but unshakable, that the encounter had not truly ended. If you were to travel to these sites now, you would find them empty, weathered, ordinary. The desert roads cracked, the forests reclaimed by moss and fog. Yet in that ordinariness lies the spell. People who visit speak of strange dreams afterward, of hearing faint tones in the night, of the odd comfort of being unseen yet not alone. Scientists might call it suggestion, the mind's echo chamber reacting to expectation. But deep within that stillness, something feels conscious, attentive. Perhaps the watchers are not visitors at all, but reflections, echoes of humanity's own longing to be observed by something greater. As the night deepens, the voice of the storyteller softens. The journey ahead will move through time and across continents, following the quiet footprints of light and secrecy. You are invited to listen, to imagine the world not as a collection of known places, but as a living fabric of mysteries waiting in the dark. The watchers do not demand belief. They ask only for attention. And in this soft hour, when thought fades into dream, that attention is freely given. Let the air settle around you. Let the boundaries of the room dissolve. The same stars that hung above Roswell and Rendlesham now hang above you, steady and silent. Perhaps they, too, are part of the watching. Perhaps the haunting presence that stirs across these forgotten sites is nothing more, and nothing less, than the universe noticing itself through human eyes. And so the story begins, not with fear, but with stillness. Not with noise, but with the hush of the infinite. The night is vast, the earth remembers, and somewhere in that quiet, the watchers remain. The idea of the silent watchers has haunted human imagination long before the word UFO existed. It is a phrase that evokes presence without intrusion, something that observes, studies, and endures, yet never speaks. To define them is to step into that fragile territory between myth and psychology, where perception bends and meaning multiplies. Across centuries and cultures, stories of the Watchers have appeared under many names: the Star People, the Sky Ancestors, the Shining Visitors, the Hidden Ones. Whether they are beings, forces, or projections of human longing, their defining quality is the same: an unshakable awareness of being seen by something vast and unknowable. Modern psychology has a term for this sensation: the feeling of presence. It often occurs in states of isolation, exhaustion, or heightened emotion. Mountaineers have felt it when climbing alone above the clouds, as if an unseen companion moved beside them. Sailors adrift at night have sensed eyes from the horizon. Astronauts have described it, too: an awareness, subtle but undeniable, of being watched from the void. Scientists say it may be the brain's way of creating company when faced with overwhelming solitude. But in the context of UFO encounters and haunted landscapes, that explanation feels incomplete. Because the sensation isn't just emotional, it often coincides with physical strangeness: static in the air, flickers of light, distorted sound. It feels like more than imagination. It feels like interaction. If we look to ancient stories, the Watchers appear again and again. Among the Hopi of the American Southwest, legends tell of the Kachinas, sky spirits who observe humankind and sometimes descend to teach or warn. In Sumerian myth, the Igigi were divine beings stationed between heaven and earth, silent attendants of the greater gods, watching the affairs of men. In the apocryphal Book of Enoch, the Watchers were celestial beings who looked upon humanity with curiosity and compassion, eventually breaking divine law to mingle with mortals. Even in Celtic folklore, mysterious lights moving through misty hills were said to be the eyes of the Ow's Sea, the people of the mounds, glimpses of a parallel realm brushing against ours. These tales, born in different continents and ages, all circle the same instinct: that somewhere beyond the visible, consciousness observes. As civilization advanced, this ancient intuition did not fade. It simply changed its vocabulary. When the skies filled with new technologies, satellites, aircraft, and radar, the Watchers transformed from spirits into visitors. The same luminous presences that once hovered above sacred mountains began to appear above military bases and small-town fields. The 20th century reframed the divine gaze into the extraterrestrial one. Yet the psychological experience remained identical: the awe, the paralysis, the sense of being measured by something far older than humanity itself. Researchers studying UFO witnesses often note a recurring theme: most do not describe aggression or fear, but observation. They speak of lights hovering silently, craft that remain motionless for long periods, presences that seem content to simply watch. Unlike cinematic depictions of invasion or abduction, the reality of most reports is passive, eerily calm. Psychologists interpret this as projection, humanity externalizing its own curiosity about the unknown. To be watched, in this sense, is to feel the universe returning the gaze we have long cast into its depths. And yet, for those who have experienced it firsthand, no scientific or symbolic explanation truly satisfies. A farmer standing alone beneath a motionless light does not think of Jungian archetypes or brain chemistry. He thinks of eyes. He feels a pulse of attention that is specific and personal. Pilots describe being locked on by something invisible, as if their thoughts themselves were being traced. Soldiers stationed in dark forests speak of an unplaceable intelligence that moves just beyond sight. These testimonies, scattered across continents and decades, repeat with uncanny consistency. Something looks back. The concept of watchers extends beyond the skies. Paranormal researchers often speak of residual presences that seem tied to particular landscapes, places marked by emotional or energetic intensity. According to these theories, traumatic or extraordinary events can leave imprints in the environment, much like light burned into film. When people later visit these locations, they may unconsciously pick up on subtle environmental cues, changes in electromagnetic fields, air pressure, or subsonic frequencies that trigger sensations of being observed. In this view, the watchers are not beings at all but echoes, the environment itself remembering what once happened there. And yet, even this rational explanation carries its own quiet poetry, that the earth itself may have a form of memory, and that in our most mysterious moments, we are feeling the consciousness of the planet beneath us. Culturally, the watchers have become a mirror for how we understand authority and the unknown. In the Cold War era, they reflected our fear of surveillance and invasion, technological eyes in the sky. In modern times, they have become more spiritual, unseen guardians, interdimensional witnesses, forces guiding human evolution. Some contemporary philosophers even interpret them symbolically as manifestations of collective consciousness, humanity projecting its own emerging awareness into the heavens. The watchers, then, are not aliens in the literal sense, but metaphors for awakening, the moment when a species begins to sense itself as part of a greater whole. Still, despite our explanations, the emotional truth remains. There are moments, often in the quietest hours, when the air feels aware. The rational mind searches for a source, wind patterns, reflections, electrical noise, but the feeling persists. It is not fear, but a heightened calm, as if one stands on the edge of an unseen communion. In that subtle hush, the boundaries of self seem to blur. You are no longer entirely alone, and yet you are untouched. Perhaps this is why so many describe the watchers not as hostile, but patient. They wait, they witness, and they remind us that existence is not a monologue but a conversation. As the mind begins to drift, it becomes easier to imagine these watchers as part of a continuum that stretches from the sacred to the scientific. Maybe they are a natural phenomenon, plasma fields or quantum echoes mistaken for intelligence. Maybe they are psychological constructs born from our need to find connection in vastness. Or perhaps they truly are sentient observers, quiet custodians of a planet still learning to look beyond itself. The truth remains suspended, shimmering somewhere between explanation and belief. For now, it is enough to know that the feeling of being watched, this ancient, shared sensation, connects us to something primal. It reminds us that consciousness, wherever it resides, recognizes its own reflection. The watchers are part of that recognition, the universe aware of its own dreaming. And as night deepens, the awareness becomes softer, more intimate, until it no longer feels external at all. Perhaps the watchers were never out there in the sky. Perhaps they have always lived in the part of the human spirit that cannot stop wondering who or what might be looking back. There are landscapes in this world that appear entirely ordinary in daylight but change in subtle ways when night descends. The air feels different, the silence becomes deliberate, and a faint sense of attention hums through the soil. These are the old UFO sites, places where something strange once touched the earth and left behind more than stories. The official reports have faded, the photographs have yellowed, but those who walk these grounds after dark say the feeling remains. It is as though the land itself remembers. In the quiet plains of New Mexico, near a small town called Roswell, the horizon stretches unbroken for miles. The wind moves through the sagebrush in long sighs, carrying grains of red dust and the scent of dry grass. Here, in 1947, the story that would shape modern UFO culture began. A rancher named Mac Brazel discovered debris scattered across his property, lightweight metal fragments, impossibly thin yet unbendable. The U.S. military first called it a flying disc, then quickly changed the wording to weather balloon. Newspapers printed, retracted, and replaced headlines within a day. The explanation was tidy, but the unease remained. Locals whispered of bodies, of trucks arriving in the night, of men in uniforms sealing off the area. To this day, visitors to the Roswell site describe a strange atmosphere, an electric tension in the stillness, as if the dry wind carries echoes of something unspoken. The power of Roswell lies not just in what may have happened, but in how the incident reshaped a nation's imagination. It marked the beginning of the idea that the sky could hold secrets greater than governments. In the years following, countless other sightings emerged, each woven with a similar pattern. Something descends, authorities arrive, silence follows. The repetition itself became haunting, turning ordinary fields and forests into mythic ground. Across the ocean, another forest holds its own quiet burden. Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England, is thick with pine and oak, its paths winding through fog that rolls in from the North Sea. In December of 1980, Air Force personnel stationed at the nearby Bentwaters base reported strange lights descending among the trees. They described a metallic craft glowing with red and blue lights, triangular and silent. When they approached, the light retreated deeper into the forest, weaving between the trunks before vanishing. Over the next 2 nights, multiple witnesses, including ranking officers, reported similar phenomena. Some recorded readings of elevated radiation, others took notes that would later become official memoranda. Decades later, Rendlesham remains a place where nature and secrecy intertwine. Walkers still report flickering lights in the mist, though rational explanations abound. Lighthouses, aircraft, tricks of the eye. Yet the sense of presence there is undeniable. Even skeptics admit that the forest has an atmosphere unlike any other, dense, watchful, almost sentient. Some call it psychological suggestion. Others believe the land absorbed the energy of that winter encounter. Whatever the truth, the forest seems to hum with memory, a living archive of the night when the sky came down to the trees. Further north, in the rolling hills of Pennsylvania, lies another place touched by mystery, Kecksburg. On a cold evening in December 1965, witnesses saw a fireball streak across the sky before crashing into the woods outside the small town. Those who reached the site first described a large, acorn-shaped object partially buried in the ground, marked with strange symbols. Within hours, the military arrived, cordoning off the area and transporting the object away on a flatbed truck. The official explanation, a meteor, satisfied few. Residents still recall how the woods glowed faintly for days, how radio interference blanketed the region, how silence descended afterward like a curtain. Today, the Kecksburg site is quiet, marked only by a replica of the mysterious craft and the steady rhythm of the forest. Yet locals still avoid the area after dusk, saying the air feels charged, as if the trees are listening. These locations, Roswell, Rendlesham, Kecksburg, form a kind of triangle across the Western world, each carrying traces of secrecy, each haunted by unanswered questions. And they are far from alone. There is the barren plateau of the San Luis Valley in Colorado, known for lights that rise from the ground instead of the sky. There are the lonely roads of Collars, Brazil, where villagers once claimed beams of light left physical burns on their skin. There are the icy ridges near Dalnogorsk, Russia, where a luminous sphere allegedly exploded against a mountain in 1986, leaving metallic fragments that defied easy classification. In every case, investigation followed swiftly, evidence disappeared quietly, and the stories remained suspended between fact and folklore. What makes these places feel haunted is not necessarily what was seen, but what was left unresolved. The combination of official denial, local memory, and lingering atmosphere transforms each site into a threshold, half historical, half spiritual. People come seeking answers, yet they leave with more questions, often describing sensations of calm unease, like standing in a room after someone has just left. Some paranormal researchers suggest that such feelings are caused by environmental factors, low-frequency vibrations, magnetic anomalies, or subtle infrasound. These can affect the human nervous system, producing sensations of dread or alertness. But others insist that these scientific measurements only describe the mechanism, not the cause. Something happened in these places, and the residue of that event still interacts with those who enter. Government documents tell their stories in another language, dry, technical, and careful. In the declassified reports from Project Blue Book, for example, Roswell is dismissed in a single sentence. Rendlesham is treated as an unexplained light source. Yet even within the most skeptical reports, small details slip through. Physical impressions on the ground, trees scorched in geometric patterns, equipment malfunctions at specific coordinates. These fragments, scattered across archives, form a pattern of absence, a record not of what is known, but of what was quietly set aside. And so, the landscapes remain burdened with unacknowledged history, the truth folded into silence. Those who visit these sites often describe a sense of communion rather than fear. There is peace in the solitude, a rhythm in the wind, and a beauty in the mystery. Standing where something once descended from the stars, the line between imagination and remembrance begins to blur. Perhaps the haunting comes not from what was seen, but from the awareness that something extraordinary may have brushed against the ordinary world and then withdrawn. The watchers, whatever they are, do not leave visible footprints, but the earth seems to remember their weight. In this way, each haunted UFO site becomes both museum and altar. The soil holds fragments of debris and fragments of story. The people who visit become participants in the same long ritual of curiosity that began when humanity first looked up. Whether the watchers were real or imagined no longer matters. The land has taken them in, and through memory, they endure. So when night returns to Roswell's plains, to Rendlesham's mist, to Kecksburg's trees, it is not just wind that moves through the darkness. It is the quiet turning of history, the pulse of unanswered wonder, and the enduring presence of the silent watchers that never truly left. The mystery of the watchers did not remain in lonely forests or desert plains for long. Once strange lights began to fill the skies and eyewitnesses came forward, the phenomenon moved from whispers around campfires into the halls of officialdom. The governments of the world, especially during the anxious years of the Cold War, were compelled to look upward and take notice. Yet the language of bureaucracy, cautious and deliberate, soon became a veil between the public and the unknown. The story of haunted UFO sites is as much about what was seen as it is about what was written down, and how those writings carefully shaped the boundaries of belief. In the late 1940s, as radar technology and jet aircraft transformed the skies into a new frontier, the U.S. military faced a growing challenge. Countless reports of unidentified aerial objects from civilians and servicemen alike. Some were easily explained as weather balloons or astronomical misperceptions, but many were not. Project Sign was established in 1948 to investigate these incidents systematically. The early reports carried a tone of genuine curiosity. Analysts even considered the extraterrestrial hypothesis seriously. But when the Air Force restructured the effort into Project Grudge and later Project Blue Book, the tone shifted. The language became colder, more procedural, and the aim quietly changed from investigation to containment. Project Blue Book operated for over 2 decades, collecting thousands of sightings from across the country. The files are meticulous: diagrams, witness interviews, radar data, environmental notes. And yet, when one reads them, there is an unmistakable pattern of dismissal. A bright orb in the night sky becomes Planet Venus under unusual atmospheric conditions. A structured craft seen by multiple radar stations becomes temperature inversion. Even incidents with physical traces are described as likely hoaxes or unsubstantiated. It's not that the investigators lacked intelligence. They simply worked within an unspoken policy: keep the skies predictable, keep the public calm. The watchers could exist in silence, but not in official vocabulary. During this same period, other governments around the world created their own secret archives. The British Ministry of Defense maintained what became known as the Flying Saucer Working Party, later evolving into official investigations under the Defense Intelligence Staff. Their internal memos mirror the American tone: restrained curiosity buried beneath bureaucratic caution. France launched JEPAN in the 1970s, later renamed GAIPAN, collecting UFO data with scientific rigor and rare transparency. The Soviet Union, though deeply secretive, ran extensive studies under military and academic supervision, often interpreting unidentified objects as potential NATO technology rather than visitors from beyond. Across nations, the same pattern emerged: curiosity at the outset, then silence, classification, and linguistic control. The language of secrecy became its own form of haunting. Where witnesses described movement, color, and emotion, official documents replaced those experiences with clinical distance. Words like anomaly, misidentification, and psychological contagion appeared frequently, as though the mystery could be domesticated by vocabulary. Even when radar logs confirmed unidentified objects moving against wind direction, reports often concluded with phrases such as "no further action required" or "insufficient data." To read these documents is to feel the ghost of truth passing between the lines, a quiet acknowledgement that something extraordinary occurred, paired with an institutional refusal to name it. In 1969, the U.S. Air Force closed Project Blue Book, declaring that no UFO posed a threat to national security and that there was no evidence of extraterrestrial visitation. Yet only a few years later, internal memos revealed continued monitoring of the skies under different classifications. Information did not vanish. It was merely relocated, renamed, and wrapped in layers of discretion. To the public, the official story ended. To those who had seen the watchers, it simply went underground. The most haunting aspect of these documents is their tone, impersonal yet intimate. Many contain hand-signed notes from officers who clearly struggled between duty and wonder. In one file from 1952, a major writes, "Observed lights executed precise maneuvers inconsistent with natural phenomena. Recommend discreet continuation of monitoring." His recommendation was ignored, and the case was marked resolved. Another report, from Bentwaters in 1980, the Rendlesham Incident, includes a memo to the Ministry of Defense noting impressions on the ground and damage to trees consistent with mechanical pressure. The response: no defense significance. It is as though the watchers themselves had entered the bureaucratic realm, transformed into phrases and stamps, haunting the margins of official paper. As technology advanced, so did the scope of surveillance. Satellites, infrared sensors, and global radar networks expanded humanity's reach into the heavens. Yet, ironically, the more we observed, the more carefully observation itself was managed. In the early 2000s, the Pentagon quietly funded the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ADIP, a modern descendant of Blue Book. Pilots recorded high-speed craft defying known physics. Radar data confirmed targets accelerating at impossible rates. The language returned, familiar and cautious: unidentified aerial phenomena, a term designed to sound neutral, technical, and unprovocative. When portions of these studies were declassified, the tone of the reports echoed the same rhythm of ambiguity: acknowledgement without conclusion, evidence without explanation. To the rational mind, this caution is understandable. Governments manage threats, not mysteries. Admitting ignorance on a cosmic scale could unsettle faith in control, in reason, in the comforting predictability of the sky. Yet to those who stand beneath those skies, The omission itself feels like an answer. The watchers, if they exist, seem to prefer the shadows of language, remaining nameless within classified archives, existing in the negative space between redacted lines. Declassified documents from other nations show similar restraint. Canada's National Research Council collected reports for decades, labeling them non-meteoric observations. Brazil's 1977 Collars case produced military files describing intense luminous activity that allegedly injured witnesses. When the documents surfaced years later, key pages were missing. France's NIS agency released portions of its UFO files online, but crucial details about trace evidence and witness identity remain sealed. Each archive reveals fragments, each silence feels intentional, and together they form a kind of global choreography, an unspoken agreement that the watchers should not be named too clearly. It is tempting to view this pattern as conspiracy, but there is another, quieter interpretation. Perhaps secrecy is a natural human response to awe. When institutions built on certainty face something unclassifiable, they instinctively protect themselves through procedure. The watcher's gaze turns both ways, the unknown observing humanity, and humanity shielding itself with reports and definitions. In the process, the mystery becomes codified, sanitized, and preserved like a fossil of astonishment hidden in paperwork. And yet, for all their distance, these archives carry an emotional residue. The witnesses who filed reports often risked ridicule or reprimand. Their statements, typed and signed, remain as artifacts of vulnerability, moments when human beings admitted that they did not understand what they saw. The bureaucrats who filed those statements, in turn, became custodians of uncertainty, writing, classifying, and sealing away fragments of the unexplainable. In that sense, the watchers haunt not only landscapes but also the corridors of government buildings, flickering in the glow of desk lamps over stacks of unacknowledged wonder. When one reads through these old documents late at night, there is a peculiar sensation, almost the same one described by those who have stood in silent fields. The words on the page seem to look back. Every redacted line, every phrase of controlled language, feels like a gaze meeting yours across decades. The watchers do not speak, but they are there, encoded in the margins of history. Their silence endures not only in the skies but also in the dusty archives of human institutions, where belief and denial sleep side by side beneath the weight of classified ink. For those who have seen something they cannot explain, something that glowed without sound, moved without logic, and left a mark on both land and mind, the experience never truly ends. Long after the lights fade, a kind of haunting remains, not in the sky but within the self. These are the witnesses who never fully sleep. They wake in the small hours, their minds replaying moments when reality felt thinner, when the night itself seemed aware. Psychologists, researchers, and spiritual thinkers have all tried to understand what happens to a person who looks into the unknown and feels it looking back. The answers are as complex as the experiences themselves. Eyewitness accounts of UFOs, and especially of haunted sites connected to them, often share a strange emotional texture, awe, confusion, and a deep sense of displacement. For many, it begins with a feeling of serenity, a light suspended silently in the sky, mesmerizing and beautiful. Then comes the realization that what they are seeing does not belong to any familiar pattern, and awe turns to unease. When the event is over, they are left with silence and the burden of memory. The mind, designed to categorize and explain, finds no suitable drawer for what it has witnessed. So the experience lingers, restless and alive, replaying itself in dreams and sudden flashes of recollection. In clinical psychology, this is often compared to what is known as a flashbulb memory, an image or sequence of sensations burned into consciousness by emotional intensity. Unlike normal memories, which fade and distort over time, these moments remain vivid and detailed, as though the mind has decided they must not be forgotten. Soldiers, survivors, and those who experience trauma describe this same mental permanence. Yet the difference with UFO witnesses is that their trauma does not come from violence, but from mystery itself. They are haunted not by what was done to them, but by what they cannot reconcile. To live with uncertainty is, in its own way, a kind of wound. Many witnesses report sleep disturbances following their encounters. Some describe lying awake with the sensation that something stands near the bed, unseen but unmistakably present. Others dream of light, bright, silent, enveloping, replaying the moment of contact again and again. Sleep researchers call this hypnagogic intrusion, a blending of waking and dreaming states, often triggered by stress or unresolved emotion. But those who live through it describe it differently. They speak of being pulled back toward the moment, as though whatever they saw continues to observe them through memory itself. This is why many never speak publicly. The ridicule they fear is smaller than the intimacy of the experience, the way it follows them in private hours when the world is still. The social consequences are equally profound. To admit seeing something inexplicable is to invite skepticism, even hostility. Communities tend to protect their sense of normalcy, and witnesses often find themselves quietly isolated. Some turn to research groups or online forums, seeking others who have shared the same disorientation. There they discover a peculiar fraternity, people who have stood under the same kind of silence and come away marked by it. These gatherings function almost like support groups, where belief and doubt coexist tenderly. The participants are not all convinced of extraterrestrial visitors. Some suspect atmospheric phenomena, others psychological projection. But what unites them is empathy, the recognition that to see something beyond understanding is to carry a burden few can imagine. A recurring theme among these witnesses is the sensation of being changed. They describe heightened intuition, sharper awareness of subtle details, and in some cases, a newfound sensitivity to electromagnetic fields or faint sounds. Scientists studying such claims often attribute them to heightened anxiety or self-suggestion, but another interpretation persists, that close encounters alter human perception in subtle ways. Perhaps standing near what feels like another intelligence rewires the brain's thresholds for pattern recognition and sensory input. Whether biochemical or spiritual, the result is the same. The world never looks quite ordinary again. Psychiatrists who have worked with witnesses often face a delicate challenge. The goal is not to disprove what the person saw, but to help them live with it. Carl Jung himself, fascinated by UFO phenomena, suggested that such visions might represent the psyche's attempt to reconcile itself with a larger reality, a symbol of unity projected into the heavens. In his view, the UFO was not necessarily an object, but an image through which the collective unconscious expressed its longing for connection and cosmic meaning. Jung did not call witnesses delusional. He called them visionaries of the modern age, experiencing the same archetypal awe that once belonged to prophets and mystics. This idea, while poetic, carries a quiet compassion. It allows the experience to matter without forcing it into proof or pathology. But not all who encounter the unknown find comfort in interpretation. Some feel watched for years afterward, describing small synchronicities or disturbances that seem to echo the initial event. Electrical devices flicker. Animals behave oddly. Shadows appear where none should be. These may all have mundane causes, yet the pattern reinforces the sense of being observed. Paranormal researchers call this the contamination effect, when an encounter seems to attach itself to the witness, radiating into their environment. Whether psychological or physical, it reinforces a theme that repeats across centuries. Once you notice the watchers, they notice you back. The government files examined earlier contain countless references to witness stress. Officers noted trembling voices, nervous laughter, or periods of stunned silence following debriefings. In some cases, medical evaluations recorded elevated heart rates and disorientation lasting hours. Yet, almost invariably, these human reactions were excluded from the final reports. The data focused on trajectory, altitude, and weather, not on emotion. The haunting, therefore, was erased from the official record, leaving behind numbers where once stood awe. But the witnesses carried the invisible residue, walking proof that the mystery affects not only the sky but the human nervous system itself. For some, the haunting evolves into a quiet spirituality. They begin to view their encounter as an initiation, an opening of perception rather than a violation of it. These individuals often speak of feeling connected to a greater field of intelligence, something that exists both within and beyond them. Scientists may dismiss this as coping, but there is dignity in it. To reinterpret trauma as transformation is a distinctly human act, one that turns fear into meaning. It suggests that the watchers, whether external or internal, serve a purpose. They awaken the awareness that the universe is not indifferent, that consciousness may be far more pervasive than we imagine. And yet, not everyone finds peace. Some remain suspended between belief and disbelief, questioning their senses, doubting their sanity. For them, the watchers become both comfort and torment, a reminder of something extraordinary that no one else believes. They live in two worlds, one grounded in routine, the other visited by that single night of impossible light. The mind tries to close the gap, to reconcile the mundane with the miraculous, but it never quite succeeds. The result is a life lived in quiet duality, where the simplest moments, a sunset, the flicker of a plane, can reopen the old question, what if they are still there? In the end, the psychology of witnesses mirrors the mystery itself, ambiguous, layered, and unresolved. Science can measure stress responses, catalog symptoms, and trace neural patterns, but it cannot map awe. The haunting that follows an encounter is not an illness. It is a transformation of perspective. The witness becomes part of the story, another watcher among watchers, carrying a piece of the enigma forward. And as night returns, as dreams reopen the space between memory and imagination, the silence outside the window feels a little more alive. The watcher and the watch dissolve into one, bound together by the same unending question. Who, in truth, is observing whom? If the haunted UFO sites exist at the intersection of mystery and memory, then Section 6 is where those mysteries begin to echo through the collective imagination. The watchers are no longer confined to single encounters or classified reports. They seep into culture, myth, and art, reshaping how humanity envisions both the sky and itself. From campfire legends to Hollywood blockbusters, from rural folklore to philosophical inquiry, the presence of the unknown has become a mirror reflecting our deepest fears and longings. The watchers, whether real or symbolic, have woven themselves into the narrative fabric of civilization. The earliest cultural traces of sky visitors predate the modern UFO era by centuries. Ancient cave art in Algeria's Tassili Eniger depicts strange figures with round heads and glowing halos, leading some to speculate about prehistoric encounters. The Dogon people of Mali tell stories of beings descending from the star Sirius, imparting astronomical knowledge far beyond their time. In medieval Europe, chroniclers described fiery wheels or globes hovering above towns, often interpreting them as omens or divine warnings. These stories, while mythologized, show a continuous human fascination with luminous watchers who descend from the heavens, symbols that transcend culture and era. By the mid-20th century, this fascination evolved into a modern mythology shaped by technology and anxiety. The 1947 Roswell incident, the 1952 Washington, D.C. radar sightings, and the 1961 abduction story of Betty and Barney Hill became cultural milestones. Newspapers, pulp magazines, and radio shows turned these events into archetypes: the crashed craft, the mysterious lights, the silent figures at the edge of human perception. In post-war America, UFOs symbolized both the hope of contact and the fear of invasion, a reflection of Cold War uncertainty. The watchers were both saviors and spies, carrying the dual symbolism of curiosity and control. Film and television amplified this duality. In the 1950s, Movies like The Day the Earth Stood Still and Invasion of the Body Snatchers explored extraterrestrial visitation as allegory, peaceful enlightenment versus paranoid conformity. Later decades brought more nuanced portrayals. Close Encounters of the Third Kind suggested contact as transcendence, while The X-Files transformed the phenomenon into a sprawling metaphor for government secrecy and existential doubt. Even within entertainment, the rhythm of fear and wonder persisted. The calm hum of a hovering craft, the blinding beam of light, the quiet observer in the shadows. These tropes became part of the language of modern folklore, passed from storyteller to audience like a digital-era campfire tale. But beyond fiction, the Watchers also found a place in spirituality and new religious movements. In the 1970s and 1980s, contactee groups began to reinterpret UFO phenomena as divine communication. The Theoria Society, founded in the UK, described extraterrestrials as advanced spiritual beings guiding humanity toward enlightenment. Others, like the Raelian movement, claimed direct telepathic contact with alien creators. These groups blurred the line between mysticism and science, proposing that the Watchers were not invaders but guardians, cosmic entities ensuring the moral evolution of humankind. Even within mainstream religion, interpretations emerged. Some Christian theologians pondered whether angelic visitations in Scripture could be reinterpreted through an extraterrestrial lens. The Watchers became part of a sacred narrative, their silence interpreted as purposeful, their distance as divine patience. At the same time, skeptics and cultural theorists began analyzing the phenomenon from another angle. Scholars like Carl Sagan and Jacques Vallée noted that UFO reports often mirrored the folklore of earlier centuries: fairy lights, ghostly processions, or sky chariots, each era translating the unknown into the language of its technology. Vallée, in particular, argued that the Watchers might not be extraterrestrial at all but interdimensional, manifestations from a parallel reality that occasionally overlaps with ours. His theory, both mystical and scientific, suggested that the phenomenon was a constant presence in human history, changing masks to fit each culture's understanding. In this view, haunted UFO sites are not just remnants of alien visitation but intersections between realities, where consciousness itself bends enough to allow other worlds to leak through. This blending of folklore, faith, and theory reshaped how society perceives the paranormal. No longer dismissed as mere fantasy, the Watchers became a legitimate subject of philosophy and anthropology. They represented what anthropologist Charles Fort called the damned, phenomena excluded from scientific acceptance yet too persistent to vanish. The Watchers, by their very elusiveness, became an idea that refused to die. Each new generation inherited not just the mystery but the emotional architecture surrounding it, the longing to know, the fear of being small, the hope of not being alone. In modern times, popular culture has turned this fascination into comfort. Sleep podcasts, relaxation videos, and slow mystery channels, like this very one, offer stories of UFOs and haunted sites told in calm, meditative tones. The fear once associated with the unknown has softened into a kind of gentle wonder. People now listen to these tales not to be frightened, but to feel connected, to drift off into dreams where mystery and tranquility coexist. The Watchers have evolved from figures of dread into companions of the night, their silence transformed into a lullaby of possibility. And yet, cultural fascination also creates distortion. With each retelling, fact and fiction blend further. Internet forums, documentaries, and viral videos often recycle claims without evidence, creating layers of myth that obscure the original events. The Watchers become symbols for whatever the audience desires: technological superiority, divine intervention, or existential mystery. Sociologists note that in a secular age, UFO stories serve the same psychological purpose once filled by religion. They restore a sense of wonder to a mechanized world. Whether one believes in aliens or not, the emotional function remains the same: to remind us that there are still frontiers we do not understand. artists and musicians have also been touched by the Watcher's allure. From David Bowie's Starman to Radiohead's Subterranean Homesick Alien, from the cosmic paintings of Alex Grey to the minimalist compositions inspired by satellite transmissions, creators have translated the mystery into sound and color. Their works express both isolation and hope, the tension between human limitation and cosmic vastness. Through art, the Watchers become metaphors for inspiration itself, the unseen muse hovering just beyond comprehension. Even architecture bears traces of this fascination. Sites like Area 51, Rendlesham Forest, and Skinwalker Ranch have become pilgrimage points for those seeking connection to the unknown. Visitors leave offerings, record EVP sessions, or simply stand in silence, gazing at the horizon where legend and reality merge. These landscapes, both real and psychological, act as thresholds between skepticism and faith. They remind us that belief itself is a haunted terrain, a place where the rational mind meets the yearning heart. In the end, cultural fascination with the Watchers reveals as much about humanity as it does about the phenomenon. We are creatures who crave meaning, who turn fear into story and silence into song. The Watchers, whether cosmic travelers, interdimensional echoes, or projections of our collective psyche, serve as the canvas upon which we paint our eternal curiosity. They are both mirror and muse, both legend and possibility. And as the centuries pass, the stories evolve, but the pattern remains. Lights appear, witnesses speak, governments deny, and storytellers listen. The Watchers, patient and unhurried, remain where they have always been, at the edges of human understanding, waiting to be seen not only in the sky, but within the imagination of those who dare to look up. As the 21st century unfolded, technology transformed the way we observe the sky, and, inevitably, the way we chase the Watchers. What was once the province of lone witnesses and secret military projects has now become a global collaboration between scientists, civilians, and digital explorers. Satellites orbit overhead, cameras monitor every horizon, and social media can spread a sighting across continents within minutes. Yet for all our progress, the Watchers remain just out of reach, appearing in pixels, radar echoes, and whispered recollections. Section 7 explores the era of modern investigation, where the search for truth about haunted UFO sites has become a dance between data, disbelief, and rediscovery. The early 2000s saw a renewed surge of official interest in unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, though the term UFO was deliberately set aside. This rebranding was strategic, an attempt to detach the study from its tabloid image and restore scientific legitimacy. Within the Pentagon, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ADIP, quietly gathered and analyzed data from military pilots and radar systems. The project, funded at the request of Nevada Senator Harry Reid, was not widely known until a 2017 New York Times expose revealed its existence. The public release of infrared cockpit footage, such as the now famous Tic Tac and Go Fast videos, triggered a global reaction. Suddenly, the Watchers were not only a bedtime mystery but a matter of documented reality, confirmed by the world's most advanced defense apparatus. The calm voices of the Navy pilots in those recordings, "There's a whole fleet of them," one says, evoked the same quiet awe that echoed through decades of eyewitness testimony. But this time, the evidence was empirical: radar returns, visual confirmation, and instrument tracking from multiple sensors. In 2020, the U.S. Department of Defense formally acknowledged the videos as authentic, stating that the phenomena were unidentified. For researchers, it was a subtle yet seismic shift, the first time in modern history that a government admitted, without qualification, that something in the sky defied known explanation. The Watchers had stepped out of folklore and into the realm of formal recognition, though still shrouded in ambiguity. Since then, private organizations and independent scientists have joined the pursuit. The Galileo Project at Harvard, led by astrophysicist Avi Loeb, seeks to apply rigorous methodology to UAP detection using telescopes, AI, and high-resolution imaging to gather repeatable, measurable evidence. Loeb's argument is simple but profound. If these phenomena are real, they should be observable, cataloged, and scientifically explained. He treats the mystery not as a myth but as a data problem, a challenge that modern technology can solve with patience and precision. This approach represents a new phase in the history of the Watchers, the migration from belief to evidence, from the subjective to the empirical. Yet even here, the results remain elusive. For every promising anomaly captured, there are thousands of false positives: drones, satellites, atmospheric distortions, camera glitches. The unknown persists, hiding not in the darkness but in the noise. Meanwhile, haunted UFO sites themselves, those geographic points where the sky seems to thin, have become laboratories for modern investigation. Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, long associated with both UFOs and paranormal activity, now hosts teams of scientists equipped with advanced sensors, magnetometers, and spectrographic cameras. Their goal is to detect measurable anomalies, electromagnetic fluctuations, ionizing radiation, or gravitational distortions that could explain the sightings. Yet, as documented in logs and filmed experiments, the phenomena resist measurement. Instruments fail, batteries drain, cameras malfunction at the precise moments when phenomena occur. It is as though the Watchers, if they exist, react intelligently, avoiding detection, or perhaps existing in a spectrum beyond human technology's grasp. For researchers, this is both frustrating and exhilarating, proof that something is happening, though its nature remains undefined. Around the world, citizen scientists mirror this effort. Amateur astronomers, drone operators, and night sky enthusiasts share data through online platforms like MUFON, the National UFO Reporting Center, and the UAP Tracker Network. Thousands of sightings are logged annually, and machine learning algorithms now analyze patterns across time, geography, and atmospheric conditions. Some clusters correspond to known human activity, such as Starlink satellites or military exercises. But a small, stubborn percentage remain unexplained, structured objects moving with intelligent intent, often near historical, haunted zones. These databases, freely accessible and constantly growing, form a kind of open-source consciousness about the Watchers, a digital mirror of the same curiosity that once drove pilots, soldiers, and lone travelers to look up in wonder. Even as science advances, skepticism maintains its essential role. Organizations like SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, emphasize the importance of extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims. They remind the public that belief must yield to data, that the line between mystery and misunderstanding is easily crossed. Astrophysicists point out that the vast distances between stars make visitation by physical beings unlikely, suggesting instead that UAP may represent unknown natural phenomena, plasma formations, magnetic anomalies, or exotic atmospheric effects. Others argue that psychological and sociological factors, mass suggestion, memory distortion, or collective expectation, play a major role in sustaining belief. Yet these explanations, though plausible, never fully dissolve the unease. Something remains, some residue of the inexplicable, persistent enough to keep even skeptics watching the sky a little longer before turning away. In parallel, declassified documents continue to emerge, often through Freedom of Information Act requests or investigative journalism. The tone of these modern files echoes that of Project Blue Book. Careful, reserved, yet unmistakably intrigued. Reports describe radar visual correlations, unusual flight patterns, and energy signatures that defy known propulsion systems. One recent intelligence assessment acknowledged that some UAP may demonstrate advanced technology not currently understood by human science. The phrasing is cautious, but the implication profound. Governments, once the gatekeepers of denial, now admit that the Watchers may be real, but not necessarily alien. They could be technological, interdimensional, or something else entirely. In this gray zone of possibility, mystery regains its dignity. Cultural shifts accompany this new transparency. The public's reaction to UFO admissions in the 2020s was notably calm. No mass panic, no apocalyptic fear. Instead, there was quiet fascination, even acceptance. The idea that we are being observed no longer feels absurd or frightening. It feels almost natural, as though humanity has matured into its own mystery. Sleep channels, documentaries, and late-night discussions treat these revelations not as sensational but as soothing, an affirmation that wonder still exists in an over-explained world. The Watchers, once symbols of chaos, have become emblems of curiosity. Their silence is no longer threatening. It is meditative. Still, the modern investigations have introduced new paradoxes. The more data we collect, the more ambiguous the picture becomes. High-resolution imagery often replaces wonder with confusion. Objects that appear metallic in one frame dissolve into reflections in the next. AI systems trained to detect anomalies flag countless false positives. The Watchers, it seems, are skilled at remaining precisely one step beyond comprehension. For some scientists, this suggests a flaw in our assumptions. Perhaps the phenomena are not external at all, but interactive, responsive to consciousness itself. If the observers influence what they observe, then the act of watching becomes part of the event. This feedback loop hints at a deeper, almost quantum relationship between mind and mystery. And so, modern investigation finds itself suspended between two frontiers, the empirical and the existential. Instruments scan the heavens, algorithms parse data, and yet the essential question remains untouched. What are the Watchers, and why do they linger near us? The answer may not lie in physics alone, but in perception, culture, and the shared human need to seek connection beyond the visible. The haunted UFO sites, with their quiet landscapes and strange lights, continue to serve as living laboratories of that search. Each investigation, no matter how inconclusive, expands our sense of possibility. As the night deepens and the machines keep their silent vigil, a pattern begins to emerge, not of proof, but of persistence. The Watchers have always been there, adapting to each era's instruments, speaking in the language of its technology. Once they appeared on radar screens, now they flicker in digital footage. Once they haunted the minds of isolated witnesses, now they hover across the collective consciousness of millions. The mystery has evolved, but its essence remains untouched. In our age of data, the Watchers remain watching still, quiet, patient, and perhaps waiting for us to look not upward, but inward, to finally understand what it means to be observed. As the journey approaches its still conclusion, the Watchers fade once more into the quiet they have always belonged to. The haunted sites, Roswell, Rendlesham, Skinwalker, return to their silence, yet something remains. Those who have listened, who have stood beneath the vast sky, carry with them a subtle change. The Watchers are no longer distant figures in the dark, but symbols of awareness itself, reminders that mystery, like consciousness, is endless. In an age that explains everything, they stand for what cannot be explained. Their presence restores the forgotten value of wonder. Every unanswered question, every light without a source, invites reflection rather than fear. The Watchers' silence becomes their message, that not knowing is not a failure, but a doorway to awe. Through them, we rediscover humility, the realization that existence is wider, older, and more alive than our understanding allows. Perhaps the Watchers are not visitors from the stars, but mirrors in which the universe sees itself. Their quiet vigilance reflects the deep truth that awareness exists everywhere, waiting to be recognized. The haunted UFO sites are sacred in their own way, places where that awareness feels close enough to touch. As night deepens, the Watchers do not vanish. They simply blend into the rhythm of the cosmos. They remain in the rustle of wind, the pulse of starlight, the breath between thoughts. Their gift is not revelation but perspective, a reminder that wonder is a form of connection, and mystery is the universe's way of speaking softly. In their gaze, we are reminded that even the unknown can be gentle, and that sometimes the greatest comfort lies in not needing to understand, only to listen. As the story nears its quiet horizon, the watchers no longer feel distant. They feel inward, as if their true domain lies within the silence of human thought. After centuries of sightings and investigation, their meaning endures not through proof, but through presence. The watchers have become symbols of awareness itself, a reflection of humanity's own consciousness gazing back through the dark. The haunted sites, Roswell, Rendlesham, Skinwalker, are not only places of encounter but mirrors of perception. Each whisper, each unexplained light, invites a deeper question. What is it within us that hungers to be watched? Perhaps the watchers persist because we need them, because they remind us that wonder has not vanished from a world ruled by data. Modern thinkers speak of a participatory universe, where the observer and the observed are bound together. In this view, the watchers are neither alien nor human. They are the living dialogue between mind and cosmos. When we gaze at the night sky, awareness meets awareness. The encounter is mutual. Their silence is not indifference but invitation, a reminder that mystery is not meant to be solved, but experienced. In that stillness, fear softens into reverence. The watcher's true message may be simple. The universe sees itself through our eyes, and every question we ask of the stars is a reflection of our own awakening. The night deepens, and the watchers fade back into the endless calm from which they came. Their presence lingers, not as evidence, but as feeling, an echo of awareness stretching across time. All along, their silence has been the final lesson. Not every unknown must yield to explanation. In their patience lies wisdom. The watchers never intrude. They observe, reminding us that stillness is a form of communication. They show that the universe's greatest truths are gentle ones, whispered through quiet rather than spectacle. Each haunted landscape, each sighting, each dream is an invitation to slow down, to rediscover awe in a world that has forgotten how to wonder. Perhaps the watchers were never visitors at all. Perhaps they are expressions of the same consciousness that flows through stars, oceans, and minds alike. Every breath, every heartbeat, every gaze toward the sky is part of their endless vigil, the cosmos watching itself in countless forms. As the final silence settles, you are no longer separate from them. The watchers are within the rhythm of your breath, within the peace that follows every question. You are the watcher and you are the watched. In this realization, the haunting ends, and only serenity remains. The night holds you gently, as it holds all who have ever looked up and wondered.